Well, now look at it, right? And now it's going to take a couple of more years, even according to the Fed, before inflation goes back down to 2%. And that means that prices are going to keep rising, probably more so than wages. So we have a weak economy. I think the Fed is taking false credit for having engineered this miracle that is going to unravel before their eyes. But there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, from the incoming administration on the Fed to stimulate, to do something to prop up the economy, to prop up the markets. And again, I think the only reason that Powell is talking tough on fighting inflation and indicating that, hey, they said that it was a tough call, that maybe they weren't going to cut 25 basis points. And in fact, if you listen to what Powell said, it made no sense to cut at all. And it makes no sense to even indicate that more cuts are coming. I mean, he still said that, we're probably going to cut rates in 2025, even though inflation is higher than we thought, and even though it's heading back in the wrong direction. If that's the case, they should be basically taking all rate cuts off the table. He all but took rate hikes off the table. One of the questions that he got in the Q&A was if the Fed would consider, or are they going to take off the table a rate hike? I think that was, are you going to take out of consideration, or can we at least know that we're not going to get a hike next year? And Powell said, well, I'm not taking anything off the table. But he said that that's not our intention, or that's not our base case, or something like that. He says, look, I don't think we're going to be hiking rates, but I'm not taking a hike off the table, right? The market didn't want to hear that. The market wants to hear, oh yeah, there's no way we're hiking rates, but he doesn't think he will. He should be hiking rates. Now, I agree. I don't think the Fed's going to hike rates. I think the Fed's going to cut rates next year. They're probably going to cut rates more than 50 basis points. Now, I don't believe they're going to be able to get all the way down to zero. But if they have to do that in order to restart QE, then that's what they're going to do, because that's the big change. QE is coming, and it's coming despite the fact that inflation is going up, because the recession that Powell thinks he averted or avoided is coming in full force. And it's going to come despite tax cuts that we might get from Trump. In fact, we might get the tax cuts during the recession. They may score it properly. Once Biden is out of office, I guess there's not as much pressure to cook the books. In fact, I already can see this whole script or show playing out, because so many people are convinced that we have a great economy. Academia, Wall Street, media, great economy, fantastic economy. Trump was just handed this, miraculous economy from Biden. The Biden, I guess the voters didn't realize just how successful Bidenomics was, for some reason. And so we had this great economy, and then Trump blew it. Here he is, only in office for a few months, and he takes this great economy and turns it into a recession, right? They're going to blame the whole thing. Not that, Trump is the reason that we're going to have a recession. We were going to have it anyway. But he'll be the fall guy, because it's going to happen on his watch, and Biden will have gotten out of Dodge before they officially acknowledge it. So we may get those tax cuts as part of the fiscal stimulus. But as I mentioned on my last podcast, we already have the biggest fiscal stimulus right now in history. We're running bigger deficits now than we were when the economy was shut down for COVID, right? The whole economy is on fiscal life support. The problem is the Fed is unplugging the monetary life support, and that's why we're dying. And so the Fed is going to come back in, with a fatal dose, I think, of QE. And so that's why this dollar rally is not going to last. The sell-off in gold is not going to last, because all this tough talk by the Fed about how they're going to, keep rates higher and fight that inflation, right? We're not going to accept. In fact, somebody asked Powell in the Q&A, will you accept inflation above 2%? Will you accept 2.5%? And he said, no, absolutely not. Of course, he's not going to be around long enough, because he's out of there in a year or so. But he said, no, the Fed is not going to rest until inflation is 2%. We're not going to accept a higher rate, no matter how long it takes. That's our target. And so What's going to happen, though, is the Fed is not going to be able to follow through because of the unexpected weakness in the economy and the labor market and the stock market. Bear market in stocks, spike in unemployment, recession. It's not going to matter where inflation is. The Fed's going to cut. And that means inflation is going to get worse. That's stagflation. That's the one thing that Powell admitted they've got no plan for. They're just hoping they don't have it. Well, they're knee deep in it. And the markets haven't figured it out.